I want you to imagine, just for a moment, a culinary culture so profoundly meticulous that the precise angle a chef uses to slice a piece of fish depends entirely on exactly how many hours ago that specific fish was caught.
Wow.
You aren't just eating seafood at that point, you're literally tasting time.
It's wild because it completely flips the Western culinary mindset upside down, you know? We're so conditioned to judge a meal by what a chef adds to it. The sauces, the heavy spices, the complex techniques.
Right, the layering.
Exactly. But here, the ultimate culinary flex is actually about what the chef refuses to do.
Which is exactly what we are decoding today. We're taking a deep dive into a fascinating stack of research tracing the history, the geography, and the Zen philosophy that created the Japanese table. We've got 3 comprehensive sources detailing everything from ancient fermentation techniques to, well, modern convenience stores.
And the mission here isn't just to make you incredibly hungry, though, I mean, that is definitely going to happen.
Oh, for sure. Grab a snack now.
Yeah, but the real goal is to figure out how Japan turned sustenance into a masterclass in minimalism. If we can decode how they uncover these incredibly deep layers of flavor, we can actually extract those principles and apply them to how we understand the world.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really get why a seemingly simple piece of sushi can bring people to tears, we have to look at the operating system running behind it.
The cultural foundation.
Yeah. In 2013, UNESCO recognized Washoku, which is traditional Japanese cuisine, as an intangible cultural heritage. And the research highlights 5 core pillars: umami, shun, which is strict seasonality, treating the plate as a visual canvas, balance, and simplicity.
And that principle of simplicity, that's where we see the direct fingerprints of Zen Buddhism. In Washoku, the highest respect you can show an ingredient is minimal intervention.
Meaning you just leave it alone.
Pretty much. Like, if you have a flawless radish or a pristine scallop, the goal is to present its natural flavor in the purest possible form. Masking it under a heavy spice blend would be considered a total failure of technique.
I was trying to find a mental framework for this while I was reading, and the closest thing I can think of is minimalist architecture.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, if you walk into one of those stunning, stark, concrete, modern homes, the beauty isn't in the decorations. It's not about what you add to the space. It's about what you strip away until only the perfect, necessary essence remains.
What's fascinating here is that that's a great way to visualize it, especially when you contrast it with how flavor is built in the West.
Right.
French or Italian cooking traditionally builds flavor by layering. You start with butter, you render out heavy fats, you reduce thick sauces, pile on herbs. Japan constructs flavor through the invisible depth of umami.
The famous 5th taste. I feel like we hear that word thrown around constantly on cooking shows now, but it's actually a distinctly Japanese discovery, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, humans have obviously been tasting umami for millennia, but it was officially defined in 1908 by a Japanese chemist named Kikunai Ikeda. He was studying traditional seaweed broths and realized the savory, mouth-watering depth he was tasting wasn't sweet, sour, salty, or bitter.
It was its own thing entirely.
Exactly. And he managed to isolate the exact molecular source, which is an amino acid called glutamate.
But, you know, a philosophy of minimal intervention and invisible depth doesn't just appear out of nowhere. Entire nations don't just wake up one morning and universally agree to be minimalists. Geography and history must have forced their hand.
Absolutely. Japanese cuisine is essentially the ultimate historical study in how severe constraints breed spectacular innovation.
Right, because it's an island nation.
An archipelago of over 6,800 islands, actually. It is incredibly mountainous, meaning arable. Flat farmland is very scarce. Around 300 BC, rice farming arrived via the mainland.
And because it yielded so much caloric energy per acre, it became the absolute anchor of the culture.
Precisely. But the real plot twist, the thing that alters the trajectory of their food forever, happens in the 6th century.
The introduction of Buddhism.
Yes. And with it comes a series of strict dietary guidelines. For centuries, the consumption of meat from 4-legged animals was severely restricted and at times outright banned by imperial decree.
Wait, I need to pause there. We are talking about the country that produces Wagyu beef today.
I know, it's wild to think about.
But for hundreds of years, an entire population living on a mountainous island chain is basically legally and religiously forbidden from eating meat. How do you even survive that without modern agriculture?
You turn to the ocean. and you completely master plant proteins. This religious constraint is the engine that drives their obsessive development of fermentation.
So they had to find a substitute.
Right. They had to figure out how to make soybeans taste as satisfying as a roasted piece of meat. That leads to the perfection of miso paste, soy sauce, and tofu. And they had to preserve fish for long winters without refrigeration.
Which brings up something that completely shattered my preconceptions when I was reading through the sources.
Oh.
We think of sushi today as this ultra-premium, hushed omakase experience where you pay hundreds of dollars to watch a master work in silence.
Right. The white chef's coat, the quiet counter.
Yeah. Wait, so sushi actually evolved as a quick Edo period street food.
Well, yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it started as something even more basic. The ancient ancestor of sushi was a survival food called narazushi.
Okay.
To preserve fish, they would pack it tightly in fermented rice and salt and just leave it for months, sometimes up to a year.
And the crazy part is they threw the rice away. That seems entirely counterintuitive for a culture where rice is the absolute staple.
It does seem wild. But the rice was just a vehicle to create lactic acid, which kept the fish from rotting. You only ate the sour, funky, fermented fish. But fast forward to the Edo period, which runs from 1603 to 1868. The city of Edo, which is modern-day Tokyo, explodes into a massive, bustling metropolis. People are busy, they're working construction, moving goods, they need cheap fast food.
So they don't have time to wait a year for a fish to ferment.
Precisely. So a new style emerges called Edomezushi, meaning in front of Edo, referring to the local bay.
Oh, I see.
Enterprising chefs started taking fresh raw fish straight from the water, slicing it, and placing it over small balls of rice. But to mimic that sour, fermented taste that people were used to from the ancient method, they splashed the rice with vinegar.
So the sushi we eat today literally evolved as the 18th century equivalent of a hot dog stand. It was fast, you could eat it with your hands on the street, and it was cheap.
Exactly. It was urban fast food sold from wooden carts alongside soba noodles and tempura. It wasn't until the Meiji Restoration in 1868, when Japan finally opened its borders to the West, that meat consumption returned in a major way.
That brought in all the Western influence.
Right. That's when you see the rise of Washoku, or Western-influenced Japanese food. Things like tonkatsu, the deep-fried pork cutlet, and Japanese curry.
But even when they adopted those Western elements, they ran them through that same minimalist, precision-based operating system. So if a home cook is operating under these historical constraints, no heavy fats, limited meat, how do they actually build a daily meal that feels satisfying?
They rely on a golden architectural rule called Ichiju Sansai, which translates to 1 soup, 3 side dishes.
So visually, you sit down, and your tray has a bowl of perfectly cooked, short-grain white rice in the center. Then you have your soup, usually miso.
Right.
You have a main protein, like a piece of grilled seasonal fish, and then 2 smaller sides, perhaps tsukemono, which are traditional pickles, or a light vinegared vegetable salad.
And the invisible mechanism tying every single element on that tray together is dashi. Without dashi, washoku simply does not exist.
Let me try an analogy here. If a Japanese meal is a song, dashi is the bass line.
Oh, that's perfect.
You might not always consciously single it out while you're eating, but you feel it. It drives the entire emotional experience of the dish. If you take the bass line away, the whole song just sounds hollow and flat.
It really is the perfect way to describe it. And dashi is a marvel of food science, achieved centuries before anyone knew what food science was. At its most basic, it is just water, kombu, which is a thick, dried kelp, and katsuobushi.
Katsuobushi is the ingredient that absolutely blew my mind. It's bonito or skipjack tuna. But they don't just dry it out.
Oh, the process is staggering. They fillet the fish, simmer it, and then subject it to a cycle of smoking and resting that takes weeks.
Weeks just for that part.
Yeah. Then they introduce a specific benign mold to ferment it and draw out the last remaining moisture. They leave it in the sun until this piece of fish becomes so dense and hard it looks and feels exactly like a block of wood.
Wait, they literally turn a fish into a wooden block?
Yes. In fact, to use it, chefs use a tool that looks exactly like a carpenter's wood plane. They drag the block of fish across the blade to shave off paper-thin, translucent flakes.
So why go through months of labor to make fish wood?
Because of a biological hack. Remember Kikuni Ikeda and the glutamate from the kelp? Well, katsuobushi is packed with a different compound called inosinate.
Okay, another amino acid.
Right. Food scientists now know that when you combine the glutamate from the kombu with the inosinate from the shaved fish, it doesn't just double the umami flavor, it creates a chemical synergy that multiplies the umami sensation on the human tongue by up to 8 times.
That is incredible. They biohacked flavor multiplication using seaweed and fermented fish wood.
Centuries ago.
And complementing that profound baseline are the core condiments. You have your soy sauce, you have your miso, you have gari, the sweet pickled ginger, which I learned is strictly a palate cleanser to eat between different types of fish.
Oh, yeah. You're never supposed to drape it over your sushi.
Right. And we have to talk about real wasabi. Most of the green paste served in the West, and even in many everyday places in Japan, is a substitute made of European horseradish, mustard powder, and green food coloring.
Yeah, real wasabi is an incredibly finicky rhizome grown in cold, running mountain streams.
It's super rare.
Extremely. And when grated fresh, it has a delicate, complex, almost sweet herbal heat that dissipates quickly. It doesn't just burn your sinuses, it chemically elevates the fat in the raw fish.
Which brings us full circle to that detail from the beginning about slicing the fish. If your culinary philosophy is minimal intervention and you aren't cooking the fish with heat, the only variable the chef actually controls is the knife. Is that why the slicing technique is so obsessive?
Precisely. The physical act of preparing the ingredient is the cooking. A master chef understands the biology of the fish. They know that a fish caught 3 hours ago has a completely different muscle tension and rigor mortis state than a fish caught 24 hours ago.
So they literally alter the angle and thickness of the blade stroke based on a mathematical calculation of how long the fish has been dead, just to ensure the texture is optimal when it hits your tongue.
It is the ultimate expression of respect for the ingredient.
So that Ichiju Sansai rule, the biohacked dashi baseline, the intense knife skills, that's the foundational operating system. But Japan's geography is extreme. You have frozen, snowy mountains in the north and subtropical beaches in the south. So how does that baseline adapt when the environment changes so drastically?
It mutates wildly. This is the concept of Kyoto Ryori, or regional cuisine. The local microclimate warps the menu.
The contrast is amazing. You start in Tokyo, historically Edo. It holds the record for the most Michelin-starred restaurants in any city in the world, beating Paris.
Right, the home of that refined Idomai sushi we talked about, fueled by the legendary tuna auctions. It is incredibly polished, high-end, and fast-paced.
But then you take the bullet train a few hours south to Osaka.
Oh, Osaka.
Osaka is fascinating because it's known locally as the Kidar City, which literally translates to eat until you drop, or ruin yourself by eating.
It's a completely different vibe.
Yeah, if Tokyo is a pristine, fine dining room, Osaka feels like the ultimate interactive comfort food laboratory. It's heavy, it's loud, and the food is cooked right in front of your face.
You have okonomiyaki, which translates to grilled how you like it. It's a thick, savory cabbage pancake mixed with pork or seafood, cooked on a hot iron griddle right at your table, and smothered in a rich, sweet sauce and mayonnaise.
And takoyaki, those molten, savory dough balls filled with diced octopus. Watching the vendors flip them at lightning speed in these specialized cast iron molds on the street is mesmerizing.
It's pure chaos in the best way.
But then, just a short train ride away from that beautiful chaos, you have Kyoto.
Kyoto was the imperial capital for over a millennium. If Osaka is street food, Kyoto is a hushed, high-end art gallery. Their cuisine, kyo-ryori, is the pinnacle of visual refinement.
It's stunning.
It's the birthplace of kaiseki, a multi-course, highly choreographed dining experience that evolved directly from the Zen tea ceremony.
It's also the center for Shojin Ryori, the completely vegetarian, incredibly intricate cuisine developed by Buddhist monks. It relies heavily on tofu and foraged mountain vegetables.
And if we look at the extreme ends of the country, the geography dictates even more drastic changes. Up in the freezing north, in Hokkaido, survival required adapting to the bitter cold. They rely on massive king crabs, and unusually for Japan, a massive dairy and butter industry.
Right. Sapporo is famous for its miso ramen, and they literally drop a thick square of butter into the hot broth to add a layer of fat that keeps you warm in the snow.
Contrast that with the deep south in Fukuoka, famous for Hakata Tonkotsu ramen. They boil pork bones at a rolling boil for hours, sometimes days, until the marrow completely emulsifies into the liquid.
Creating a soup that is creamy, opaque, and incredibly heavy.
Exactly.
This proves that principle of shun, doesn't it? It's not just about what season it is. It's about being perfectly attuned to the specific physical environment you are standing in. You don't eat Sapporo butter ramen in the humid, sweltering summers of Kyoto.
Exactly. The food is a high-fidelity reflection of the environment.
So we've covered the meals, the high-end sushi, the rich street food, but what about outside the main event? How do people snack, drink, and socialize?
Well, you have to look at wagashi, the traditional Japanese sweets.
And once again, the philosophy of balance holds true. They don't just dump processed sugar into a bowl. I was looking at how they make mochi, for instance.
Oh, the mochitsuki pounding process?
Yes, they take steamed glutinous rice, put it in a massive wooden mortar, and literally smash it with giant wooden mallets over and over again. It physically breaks down the grain structure and cross-links the starches until it becomes this incredibly elastic, chewy dough.
It's a workout. And
Well,
you'll notice that wagashu, whether it's mochi stuffed with red bean paste or dorayaki pancakes.
the ones eaten by the cartoon character Doraemon,
That's the one. They all have a surprisingly low sugar content.
because they aren't meant to be eaten alone,
Mm.
right?
Exactly. They are specifically engineered to balance the intense, grassy bitterness of matcha, the powdered green tea served in tea ceremonies. You eat the subtly sweet bean paste, you take a sip of the bitter tea, and the two flavors perfectly neutralize each other in your mouth.
It's all about harmony. And when it comes to socializing after work, the epicenter is the izakaya, which is essentially a Japanese gastropub.
Right, you go with coworkers, the plates are small, meant for sharing.
You order yakitori skewers of grilled chicken over charcoal, and they utilize every single part of the bird. The liver, the heart, the crispy skin, the cartilage, nothing is wasted.
And naturally, you're drinking sake.
Here's something I never understood until reading this research. When you buy a bottle of sake, there's a percentage on the label, the polishing ratio. Why are they polishing the rice before they brew it?
Because the outer layers of a rice grain contain lipids, fats, and proteins. If you ferment the whole grain, those fats create rough, earthy, off flavors in the alcohol. But right at the core of the grain is a pure pocket of starch.
Oh, I see.
So by physically milling or polishing away the outer layers, sometimes removing 50% or more of the original grain for high-end daijinjo sakes, you are left with just that pure starch. It brews into an incredibly clean, aromatic, elegant drink.
It's another mechanical hack to reach the pure essence of the ingredient. And the etiquette in these spaces is just as intentional. Before taking a single bite, the Japanese bring their hands together and say "itadakimasu," a phrase that essentially gives humble thanks to the plant and animal life that was sacrificed and to the hands that prepared it.
And afterward, gochisa-sama deshita, to give thanks for the feast. You also see strict physical etiquette. For instance, you never ever stick your chopsticks vertically into a bowl of rice.
Right, because that visually mimics the incense sticks lit at Buddhist funerals. It's a reminder of death at the dinner table, which is considered extremely poor manners. And perhaps the most surprising rule for Westerners, you never leave a tip.
Leaving money on the table can actually cause deep confusion and, in some cases, offense. The cultural belief is that providing excellent attentive service is just the baseline expectation of doing your job well. The pride is in the work itself. It's already included in the price.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
All right.
We just spent 20 minutes discussing centuries of Zen Buddhism, biohacking amino acids, and Michelin-starred chefs calculating rigor mortis. Why on earth does a massive portion of this research dedicate itself to 7-Eleven?
Ah, the konbini paradox.
Yeah, in the West, if you are eating a hot dog from a gas station convenience store, you are making a heavily compromised, desperate life choice. But in Japan, the konbini places like 7-Eleven, Lawson, Family Mart are culinary institutions.
They really are. You can walk into a 7-Eleven in Tokyo and buy a perfectly formed onigiri, a rice ball wrapped in crisp seaweed, or a hot, complex bowl of Oden stew, or a beautifully packaged seasonal sweet, and the quality is staggering.
But how does convenience store food fit with the Zen philosophy of Washoku? Doesn't mass production contradict everything we just talked about?
It actually proves the ultimate point. The konbini shows us that the Japanese standard for freshness, balance, and quality isn't just a luxury reserved for the wealthy eating at a high-end kaiseki restaurant in Kyoto.
It's just baseline.
Exactly. That standard permeates the absolute foundation of the society. When a culture truly believes that food is a reflection of respect, they simply refuse to mass-produce garbage, even for a quick Tuesday lunch at a convenience store.
Wow. That actually perfectly ties everything together.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this right now? We started this deep dive looking for core principles we could extract.
And the mechanisms are clear.
Yeah. It's the pursuit of umami, finding the invisible, multiplying depth, rather than just piling on the heavy, obvious flavors. It's the philosophy of minimal intervention, having the confidence to let a great idea or ingredient speak for itself without masking it. And it's the intense, focused execution, like polishing a grain of rice down to its purest core.
This raises an important question, something for you to mull over today. We live in a modern world that is completely obsessed with adding more. We constantly want more flavor, more notifications, more information, more noise.
Just constant piling on.
Right. But what if true mastery, just like Japanese gastronomy, is actually about the courage to strip away the excess?
That's got a powerful shift.
What if applying the principle of shun, being perfectly quietly attuned to the exact moment and environment you are in right now, and applying minimal intervention to how we consume information, could make our minds as sharp and clear as a sushi chef's knife?
What if the most profound thing you can do is just figure out what is absolutely necessary and then execute it flawlessly? I love that. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the soul of the Japanese table. Keep questioning the noise, keep stripping away the excess, and keep learning. Catch you next time.